Hi everyone, and welcome to my boss guide for Grigoire. In Season 4, Blizzard has introduced the so-called Tormented bosses. These are level 200 versions with much more damage and in particular much more life than the originals, and they are extremely rewarding. So once you are at the point where you can farm them, you want to farm those level 200 versions. They're much better than the regular. With that being said, there are some mechanics in these encounters that are really important to understand in order for you to succeed. In particular, when your build is not strong enough to just like outright destroy them in seconds, then you really want to understand what is going on so you can take them down. What you need to know about those Tormented bosses is there is a new Tormented debuff. You can see that here right now, the red skull debuff there. This is a mechanic that applies to all of those Tormented bosses. And basically what it does is it increases the damage taken for the rest of the encounter if you get hit by certain abilities. So usually they are not so threatening. However, if you get hit by those specific spells and you do a mistake, then it ramps up the damage that you take, and at some point it's just too much. But from my experience, usually like 1 or 2 stacks were kind of fine if you had enough defense and sustain, and then beyond that it was almost not survivable. So you really want to be careful with those stacks, and worst case, you might have to restart. In the case of Grigoire, there are 2 important abilities to be aware of here that can give you those stacks. The first one are those lightning beams. So you see this here. Every time, like every so often, like periodically, every 30 seconds or so, he spawns these lightning beams between those obelisks. So you see this here. They have random patterns, so they can go from any of those obelisks and between obelisks and the wall. So you don't want to stand between, like, 2 obelisks, for example. When this phase starts, there's like a little like a warning pattern, basically like an animation before it starts. You see this here where it zooms out, and then you see like the lightning beams coming down, and you see like the connections happening basically one by one. You just need to make sure that when this phase starts, you are not standing either between the obelisks or between obelisk and a wall, and also not directly at a wall, because in order to avoid the cheese, I guess, they added lightning beams here as well next to the wall. So you see this here on the right, there's not even an obelisk. So if you stand too close to the wall, you can also get hit by those beams. So this is really important. You want to stand in the right place when this phase starts. They don't move, so they just spawn in different patterns, but you don't have to worry about suddenly the beam jumping around or something like that once it's already up. Now, all of this is said easier than done, because Grigoire himself also has a knockback that he does very frequently. And it also throws you basically straight through the entire arena. And this is this attack here that you can see right now. He lifts his left arm very far behind his back and then does a big slam that also releases a bunch of these lightning bolts. So this is the one you want to avoid. If you can tank his damage, this is the easiest. Then you can just kind of like tank his damage like this here, stand in all of the hits. But then beware, whenever he lifts his left arm behind him, this is a knockback, and you want to make sure that you don't get hit at all, or at the very least don't get knocked into a beam or into the wall that has a beam or something like that, because that's the easiest way to acquire those stacks and fail the fight. So I will show this attack one more time. This is here the next slam. So he lifts his left hand, and this is the time for you to either get out of there with a dash, an evade, a teleport or something, or use your unstoppable. So this attack doesn't really do much more damage than other attacks. It just has this knockback that can then lead to those stacks accumulating. So if you have unstoppable in your build, for example, in my build here, I did that. I had Shadow Step, I had a Shadow Clone. So for example, on the Rogue, you can do that. You can do this with Concealment. You can do it with, Rallying Cry on a Barb. There are various ways to acquire unstoppable on demand and just completely ignore this mechanic. However, he does the slam pretty frequently, so you need to have very frequent unstoppable applications. And the second mechanic that gives you those stacks are those ground tiles. So you see this here, especially towards the later stages of the fight, I think below 50% HP or so, there is this intermission phase where Grigoire disappears, and then these ground tiles start lighting up. They also have random patterns, and on top of this you have the random lightning beams as well between the obelisks, so you have to like walk around them and get into one of the safe zones. There are 9 of those tiles, and 2 of them will remain empty. Which ones of those seems to be completely random. They can be right next to each other, they can be on opposite sides, they can be like one here, one there. I have not really found any pattern, I don't think there is one. However, one thing to note is that it doesn't seem that easy to avoid those ground floors consistently 100% of the time by just walking. So having something like a teleport or a dash, or maybe like an immunity that allows you to like just walk through them like Blood Mist, is very helpful for this phase as well, because sometimes you get bamboozled and you run into one direction and then everything fills up around you and you have to go to the complete opposite side for the safe zone. So that can happen. And in that case, yeah, if you don't have anything ready, then you might be in a really bad spot. Because compared to those lightning beams, those ground tiles actually kill you really fast. They tick for like a high damage, and they also give you stacks really fast. So basically, I don't know, once a second or twice per second, you get one of those stacks. So you basically immediately die. The way that I handle this phase is usually going into the middle and then waiting for the first tiles to appear. And then you start reacting to, okay, where is still a safe zone? You start walking towards the safe zones, basically. So you see here, there's usually like 4 or 5 of these tiles spawning really quickly. In this case, you see, okay, there's only like 3 left here. So at least 2 of them will be a safe zone and only 1 of them will fill up. In that case, here I saw this was filling up on the top left and I went to the right. But it could be any other direction. There is like just a random pattern and you have to react to where are those safe zones. I can show you another example of this intermission phase here, and this is exactly what I just meant, where you get bamboozled. Like you start in the middle, then walk towards the safe zones and you think, okay, maybe one of them will be a safe zone, but then they both fill up and I had to turn around and go to the opposite side. And it doesn't really seem like there's any way to predict that, so you have to be on your toes. Other than that, Grigoire doesn't actually really have many threatening mechanics. He does slam you in various ways with like some extra lightning damage attached. So sometimes there's some lightning bolts, sometimes there's like these lightning ground circles, and yeah, a bunch of other things like that. None of it really seems to matter. However, his auto attack damage might have been buffed a little bit in the final patch. So far, at least on the PTR, he wasn't that threatening. The only 2 mechanics that are really important were those beams and the floor tiles. He also spawns these ads, but they just kind of just die. I didn't really feel like they were a threat either. However, if you have many of those tormented debuffs, then basically anything can become a threat later. So keep that in mind. If you fail and you get those stacks, once you have like 2 or 3 of those stacks, then stuff really starts hurting, and even the regular attacks you have to dodge. And that's pretty much the entire encounter, so I hope you enjoyed this boss guide. Hope it helps you to take down those tormented versions. Personally, I had a lot of fun fighting those, especially on builds that were not like completely ridiculously overpowered, and I think they've actually done a pretty good job at making these bosses exciting. I'll have more boss guides for you, so go check them out on my channel. Otherwise, good luck in Season 4, and see you guys next time.